Hello, crypto world! Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. This is going to be an XRP video, an index video, a Bitcoin dominance video, and maybe even a little Bitcoin. The reason why I'm jumping all over the place is because we need to understand the bigger picture. So what I'm going to focus on first is the indexes. Now, some of this will be review, but stick around because it goes into the new stuff with the indexes. I'm going to end with XRP. So once we have the picture painted, we can understand where we are in XRP and what we should and should not expect. So let's dive in and get started. This is going to be an exciting video. Stick around because I'll end with XRP. So if we go back to the very beginning of the Dow Jones, it starts in 1896, and it's from 1896 to 1932 that we are concerned with. And the reason why is all these boxes, they have been repeating for the past 90 plus years. So this structure or pattern is a very large pattern that has been at play. It's my belief we're in this box from 1921 to 1929, and furthermore, I believe we are really just at the very peak. Let's zoom in on this structure so we get a better look at it. So what I'm concerned with is this final part right here from July 1929 all the way to September 1929. It's this area where I believe we are currently at. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with my videos, you're probably wondering what this pattern repeats. Well, it does. So I'm on a 3-day candle. Let me zoom out a little more so we can get a better look at this. Okay, so I'm zoomed out on a month candle now, and this first blue box from 1932 to 1942 is really just a repeat of 1896 to 1903. You can see the fractal. This fractal is taken from the original box. So the pattern is repeating, albeit the timing, height, and depth is playing out uniquely. So the next box is from 1942 to 1966, and it's basically a repeat of 1903 to 1906. You can see it plays out on a much larger scale this time around. Well, we keep going through all these boxes, and it brings us to where we are today. You can see that these structures do match. So it's my belief we are really just in the final leg or move up of the blow-off top of this macro repetitive structure. After this completes, we go into this portion right here, which is the decline. Now, as I pointed out in my previous videos, this decline is not anything that any of us living most likely have experienced. I don't know how much it's going to drop, but it's likely going to be a very large decline. Just like back in 1929 to 1932, this massive reset takes place, and it restarts the pattern all over again, and what comes after this is really going to be very different. As you can see from this structure right here, it's not going to be anything like this. It's going to be a restarting again. Now, sure, there could be some dynamic movement. Maybe in the initial bounce back from the bottom, we could see some aggressive movement, but overall, it's going to be a different environment. So let's jump back to where we were and examine where I think we're at on a smaller time frame. Okay, so here we are on a 4-hour candle, and this is that fractal from July to September 1929, stretched to match this area right here. Now, this blue fractal is this part of the fractal just matched to what the timing, height, and depth is doing on today's chart. As you can see, today's chart doesn't have this aggressive move up that it had in 1929. So it's possible that we are actually peaking out right now. Now, there is the possibility, as I've pointed out in some of my previous videos, that this could potentially be doing something on a larger time frame or a larger scale, maybe like this. We don't know for sure. If we start seeing it continuing to move up, then I'll adjust this fractal. But we should be aware that this, or something like this, it could go up a little more, is a possibility. Since my last video, I've actually adjusted this fractal a little larger. This is not the only fractal, though, that we should be comparing to, because there's some other fractals that I believe are relevant to what is taking place on today's chart. Okay, so this is a new fractal I'm going to introduce, and it's a recent history fractal. Now, the deal with recent history fractals is they can be good guides, however, they can break at any given moment. So this is the previous all-time high, or the move up to the previous all-time high right here. So it's basically from November to December right here. Now, I've stretched it to match the timing, height, and depth. As you can see, it has been following what this fractal suggests. Now, this is a possibility. It could potentially hang out here like this for a while if it's playing out at this scale, which it does look like this is a possibility, and then eventually start dropping. This is not the only possibility. Now, there's another fractal I have been following. It's the run-up to the C19 crash. Let's take a look at that one. All right, so here's that fractal. Now, for those of you who follow this channel, you're probably familiar with this structure by now. So this structure comes from this blue box, which takes place from December 2018 to March 2020. This is essentially the run-up to the C19 crash. Now, the little black box that is at the peak right here is this black fractal. Okay, so here we are zoomed in. Now, I was on a day candle. I'm now on a 2-hour candle. So as you can see, it does follow what this fractal suggests. Now, there is a possibility that it's playing out on a larger scale. As this chart develops and we get clues of that, we can kind of stretch the fractal to match what's taking place. Now, since my last video, I have stretched this fractal to make it a little larger, as I believe it's playing out on a larger scale. But this is a possibility. This would mean that the Dow Jones is potentially peaking out. Now, let's compare the other two fractals that we examined and see if they tell a similar story. Okay, so here is the one from 1929 in blue versus the C19 one in black. Let's add that final one, which is this move up to the peak right here. So here is that final one, and you can see all three. It's a little confusing, but each of them tells a similar story. So we have the move up and possibly peaking out or near the peak, assuming it's not playing out on a larger time frame. Eventually, we're going to start on the decline. Now, it could potentially hang out in this elevated area for quite some time. This actually goes into the next year. I don't know if it's going to do that, but it is a possibility, or it could start declining sooner. But this is not the only index that's telling this story. Let's take a look at some of the other ones. So this is the S&P 500, and just as in my previous videos, I've explained what this is. It's basically the same as the Dow Jones, the box from December 2018 to March 2020, which is the run-up to the C19 crash. I take this same fractal, stretch it to what comes after this box. Of course, we have to match it to the timing, height, and depth, and we can see a very similar structure has been playing out since March 2020. The blue box is this blue fractal that I use to help track where we are in this final peak structure. By the way, all these little boxes, these fractals are copied on a lower time frame, so it gives us more clarity as to what's going on. Let's zoom in and take a look at what this blue fractal's doing. Okay, so I'm on a 2-hour candle. I was on a day candle before. As you can see, it is following along. Now, I believe I've also adjusted this fractal a little larger compared to my last video. If this is the scale that it's playing out at, and at the moment it does look like it is, we could also potentially be working on that final peak. This is the S&P 500. How about we look at the Nasdaq? Okay, so this is the Nasdaq, and it's really the same story. December 2018 to March 2020. The little blue box is this blue fractal. We're going to use it to see where we are in this final peak structure. Let's zoom in. Okay, so here we are on a 2-hour candle, and as you can see, it does look like we potentially are at the peak. Now, I believe I also have adjusted this fractal a little bit larger since the last video, and it could potentially also be playing out on a larger scale that we aren't aware of just yet. But today, right now, it does look like it is playing out at this scale, and if so, we could potentially be working on the peak. Now, when I say working on the peak, it could still potentially move up a little higher, but it is, or it looks like it could be part of this final peak structure. Let's take a look at the Russell. Okay, so this is the Russell 2000, and similar to all the other ones, you take December 2018 to March 2020, copy and paste it onto this part of the chart. Of course, you adjust it for the timing, height, and depth differences. And of course, this little blue box is this blue fractal. It's taken on a lower time frame. Before we get into this, the Russell has a lot going on, and I would like to give a shout out to BC Backer, who's been covering this index. He's done a great job, and this index is important, like he says. So how about we zoom in and see how this blue fractal is doing or comparing to what's going on the chart. Okay, so here we are on a 2-hour candle. Now, I have adjusted this fractal since my last video. It's a little larger, and it's my belief that we potentially are working on this portion of the fractal. Now, of course, it's moving up higher. This green line, by the way, is the most recent all-time high, which is right here. So hopefully we'll be getting above that. Time will tell. Now, there is this fractal that we should be aware of, but there's another one. There's actually several that I want to show you. So let's remove this. Okay, I hope I'm not making this too complex. All right, so at the top, I have Bitcoin. In the middle, I have the Russell 2000, and on the bottom, I have the Bitcoin dominance. Now, in my previous videos, I've been talking about how the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018 is an important time frame. This Bitcoin dominance fractal is what we are following on today's Bitcoin dominance chart. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here is the Bitcoin dominance with that fractal that I just showed you. I've shown you this in previous videos. As you can see, it's followed the rough idea. Now, some of the timing has changed. So, for instance, this portion played out quicker on today's chart than it did back in the day when this took place in 2017 or 18. I'm not exactly sure when this part is. As you can see, it's deviated here and there, but it continues to follow the basic idea. Now, we could potentially be deviating again and avoiding this, knock on wood. Okay, so as you can see, we are following this rough idea, and I pray to God we don't get this. It's a possibility, but I don't know if we will. Now, with Bitcoin, it's possible that we've already peaked out, although I don't think that's the case, or at least I'm not 100% convinced yet. I think there's a possibility it still moves up and makes another all-time high. Granted, it is possible we are in the declining part of Bitcoin. Time will tell. Now, with the Russell 2000, so this is what was going on with the Russell 2000 during all of this back in 2017/18. Well, if we were to take this fractal, copy and paste it onto today's chart, it would look something like this. Now, this is from November 2017 to February 2018. As you can see, it does resemble what's taking place on today's chart. Now, it is possible that we can still move up beyond the current all-time high. Just because this fractal shows something like this, that doesn't necessarily mean it will top out there. Remember, the timing, height, and depth is going to be unique every time a structure repeats. So just as 2017/2018 has been important for the Bitcoin dominance, and I believe for all of crypto in general, I believe it's also important for the Russell 2000. Now, notice how this declines. This decline is similar in structure to the C19 fractal. Let's compare them both. As you can see, they both do something similar. They kind of come to a peak and then start the decline. This 2017/18 is a little more extreme. It looks like this is a closer match than this C19 fractal, at least at the moment. There's another fractal I want you to be aware of. Okay, so this is Bitcoin on top, and this is the Russell 2000 on the bottom. My goal with comparing the Russell 2000 to Bitcoin is to show you the correlation between crypto, and the Russell 2000, which is something that BCB does extremely well. And if you haven't followed him, I recommend that you do follow him. So I'm really just echoing and trying to show additional evidence of what he fundamentally is saying. So this is the peak, especially right here, of the 2021 Bitcoin bull run. So if we were to take this structure, which includes the move up, of course, really it's just the latter part that Bitcoin begins to start moving aggressively. But then this also occupies this whole time on Bitcoin where it comes to these two different peaks. So if we were to take this structure, copy and paste it onto today's Russell 2000, this is how it would look. Okay, so here we are on a day candle. So this is kind of a big zoomed out picture of the Russell 2000. So this fractal is from March 2020 to November 2021, I believe. As you can see, it has been following the basic idea as it's been moving up. And if this is to continue to play out, we potentially have this long area that goes into the next year of this range-bound time that exists potentially above the current all-time high. Now, this could play out. It is a possibility, but we need to weigh this against everything else that we have looked at. Everything else tends to turn over a lot sooner. So while this is a possibility, I would not count on it too much. I would be quite skeptical of this, actually. Let's zoom in and get a closer look. Okay, so here we are zoomed in, and it still looks like a good match. So if this is at play, it would continue moving up before it hits this range-bound time. Let's compare this fractal against the two other ones, the C19 one and the 2017/2018 fractal. Okay, so here we are. I'm on a 3-hour candle, and once again, they tell a similar story where they move up. Now, the 2017/18 and the C19 one tell a different story. It begins to turn over, and this, by the way, is in harmony, or is what the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 are saying, and potentially the Dow Jones as well. The Dow Jones has one fractal that potentially extends out a bit further, but it does not do this. So once again, we should remain skeptical of this. However, it is worth noting, and it is a possibility in the theoretical universe of possibilities. However, I would tend to think this, at least today, at the moment, is what seems like the greater potential. All right, let's jump back to XRP. Okay, so we've come full circle. We're back at the XRP chart. You know, for the longest time, or at least for a while, people were saying that what we're going through today was something similar to this. I did a video, I'll post it on the top right-hand corner, showing why that is not the case, and I believe it has turned out to be true, as the talk of this has seemed to have faded away. Believe it or not, XRP has a repetitive macro structure. This is what it looks like. It's kind of confusing, but essentially there are 3 different parts in the XRP macro structure. There's a bull run, which is barely visible. There's the decline, which is the blue boxes, and then these black boxes is the sideways range-bound time that exists between the decline and the next bull run. You can see it just repeats all over again. So today's bull run is just so different. This is still the same bull run from when it started over here. Let's zoom in and take a look at this. Okay, so here we are zoomed in. Now, XRP has 3 corrective structures in a bull run. They happen every single time. They look different every single time, but the functions are the same. It has its first correction, it moves up into its second corrective structure. There's 2 parts to this one, a lower one and an upper one, and then it moves up and then it goes into its third and final correction before moving up to the peak. Now, for the longest time, I thought this was the correction, the third correction, and this was potentially the peak, and it was just so depressing because it was so low. We waited for so many years, and this is it. Structurally, there was that possibility. However, once it made this new high, I knew that this was all one big correction. We're still in it. Now, are we getting near the end? That is the question. Well, let's talk about what happens after it gets out of this corrective structure. So it will move up aggressively in a short amount of time, and if you're on a small time frame, like an hour candle, you can count 7 moves that brings it to the peak. I've done videos on this. You can go back and watch some of them. Essentially, once it gets above this current high, it will happen fast. I don't know where it will peak out at. I'm not going to try to predict that because I think that's a fool's errand, really, but there's plenty of other analysts that are probably better at that than I am. What I can say is that it's going to happen very fast. Now, there are some fractals that we can take from within this bull run structure and compare it to what's taking place on today's chart, and we can get some possibilities of how things could play out in the near future. Let's take a look at those. Okay, so this first fractal is from December to January. So it's essentially from here all the way up to here. Let's zoom in and get a closer look. So there are some differences. For instance, right here, the fractal shot up and then kind of went sideways, where on today's chart, it just kind of moved up. But I would say overall, it's following the basic idea. Now, once it gets above this high, don't look at any of this, because this is not how it's going to play out most likely. There's going to be 7 moves. They're going to be quick moves for the most part, most likely. I don't know for sure. I'm not from the future. But anything above here, you should not put too much weight on. So this doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go that high. Like I said, I don't know how high it will go. Okay, so this is one fractal. So this next fractal is this right here, just copy and pasted over here. Let's zoom in and get a closer look. Okay, so here we are zoomed in, and again, it's not exact, but it does seem to follow the basic idea. So if this is at play, we potentially are getting near an aggressive move up. Time will tell. Let's compare both of these two fractals. So you can see that they're similar. There's a few differences here and there. Counting on what we potentially have left to go, there is a potential for a pullback before getting above the all-time high. Although we don't necessarily have to do that. This one shows us going straight up. Now, there's a possibility it could break from these fractals, but they have been in play for quite a while, and while there are deviations here and there, they tend to kind of snap back in line, at least following the basic idea. So the safe bet is to assume that the same kind of deviation / snapping back in line would continue to play out. Now, if a big break happens, well, we can talk about that if that does take place. There's one other fractal. So this is from August 3rd to August 8th, I think it is. Now, one of them is on a small scale or small time frame, and the other one I stretched out on a much larger time frame. So as you can see, the large one does kind of resemble what is taking place. If this is to continue following the basic rough idea, we would once again be starting on the move up. Let's remove this big one, and here is the small one. Now, this small one was a pretty good match, and it could still snap back in line, but this kind of seems like a deviation, so we'll have to see how this actually plays out. But all these fractals point to a potential move not being far away, so we'll have to see how this plays out. Of course, there could be deviations, and of course, it could break. All these are considered recent history fractals, and recent history fractals can be great guides, but they do break. The main thing that we should be on the lookout for is once price gets above this high, then we need to start counting those 7 moves to the peak. So before we conclude, there's another important point. All the indexes have painted a picture of nearing a peak, which means we don't have too much time left, which means this type of fractal that's showing that a move up is not too far away, I believe, is likely correct. I could be wrong about that, but it seems to tie in well with everything else. And that's what we need to look for. Crypto, XRP, Bitcoin, they have their place within the bigger picture. They're patiently waiting in line for their turn. And one other thing, what makes me think that Bitcoin hasn't reached its bull run peak yet is, as I pointed out in my Casper videos, Casper tends to move after, or at least historically it has, after Bitcoin has come to its bull run peak. Casper hasn't been moving. It's just a stick in the mud right now. So that makes me think that there's more to the Bitcoin story than what's printed on the chart so far. Let me remove this. So here we are back at the macro structure that XRP has. It's a little confusing. I've done many videos on this structure. For those of you who are interested in my type of analysis, I have a Discord you're welcome to join. It's connected to my Patreon. I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description of this video. It's a $5 a month subscription. I am active there, much more active than I have been on YouTube. So if you want to stay connected with me and have frequent updates on how I see things playing out, that's the place to be. If you found this video helpful, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. This is not financial advice. This is important. I'm not a financial advisor. You need to stand on your own convictions, do your own research. You know, for what it's worth, the indexes, I know I'm potentially freaking a lot of people out showing those massive declines that we could potentially get. Now, in my mind, there's two ways to look at that. You can look at that and just freak out and panic. That's the natural human emotion. In investing, we're always trying to tame that devil inside of us. You know, we also say in investing, listen to your gut. Well, I think your gut is many times just the same thing, your fear, your emotions. But I think sometimes it's actually God's voice speaking to you. God can speak to you in any way he wants. We're wired to hear from him. If you can learn, and it takes practice, to recognize his voice, I believe going through those times where if we are called to go through declines like that, he can be your guide. And that is the most valuable thing you can have. It's more valuable than any of these riches we're trying to pursue. Well, I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.